On today's show, it's a Locked On Rockets Mailbag Edition episode. Can Reed Sheppard take over for Fred VanVleet next season? Is Jabari Smith Jr. being underutilized? Is Alperen Sengun the best closing option for this Rockets roster? What about the playoffs? What about offseason expectations? It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Thursdays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Also, check out our Locked On Rockets newsletter. Would sincerely appreciate all of that support. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. We've got a mailbag edition episode here on today's show, a near end of season mailbag with a lot of burning questions about the direction this team is heading, things to look for in the future, expectations for the playoffs and the offseason, and a lot of different things to go ahead and dive into. Really appreciate everybody who took the time to submit a question or a topic. We got a ton of responses to choose from for this show, and I want to put a quick disclaimer here at the top. There were a handful of people who had kind of draft-centric or draft-related topics and questions. Not going to hit on anything draft-related in this show. We've got a ton of draft content coming down the pipeline. I promise you that. So just hang on tight. We'll get to some of the draft stuff a little bit later on. But let's go ahead and start out here with our first batch of questions. And I got a pair of questions concerning Reed Sheppard that were both a little similar, so I'm going to lump them together. So from Rashad 18, can Reed Sheppard take Fred's spot next season? I mean, he can undoubtedly score more and facilitate almost equally. Look at the Warriors game, Fred, and imagine Reed getting those shots. Look, and then the other Reed Sheppard kind of adjacent question from NBA_UAE. What's the chances of Reed breaking into the lineup next year, and will Udoka ever give him an extended run to gain his confidence back? I fully believe Reed Sheppard has what it takes to potentially easily break into the lineup next season. In fact, I think I said it in a recent show that if you were to roll back this exact same roster next year for the Rockets, Reed Sheppard's probably eating up all of the Aaron Holiday minutes. In fact, Reed Sheppard's probably his role next season, if everything stays the same, would likely be the role the Rockets tried to give him earlier this season. He just wasn't quite ready for it. As far as confidence and Ime giving him extended run, it's not going to happen. I mean, if the Rockets keep punting these final two games, then maybe Reed gets a little bit of burn there, but don't expect him to be a fixture in the playoffs. Ime, if he needs a tertiary guard off the Rockets bench, he's going to go with Aaron Holiday in pinch minutes here and there in the postseason. As far as can Reed take Fred's spot next season, that's a really, really interesting question. I don't know if Reed is necessarily ready to take on a starting level role of 30 plus minutes a night. I'm sure he could, and I'm sure that it would look all right, but there'd also probably be a lot of growing pains associated with it. I think a much more fascinating option for this Rockets team to consider if they do not want to bring back Fred VanVleet, whatever that may look like, opt in and trade, straight up decline his option. Maybe you renegotiate him on a cheaper deal and you want to wean him off so you still have him around, but you can alternate between Fred and Reed as needed. Who knows? I think a much more interesting option would be just starting a backcourt of Jalen and Amin and then having Reed be your tertiary guard off the bench. Whatever it looks like, I think Reed is going to have a much more substantial role starting at the very beginning of next season. The Rockets are very, very high on Reed internally. They've never wavered much, unlike Rockets fans who are ready to dump Reed and abandon ship and cut ties halfway through his rookie season. Rookies need time to grow and develop. They do. And Reed has looked a lot more solid in some of these games as of late when he does get a little bit of time. So Let's go ahead and get to our next question here. Is Jabari Smith Jr. being extremely underutilized? I think this is the biggest question I have outside of the topics we repeatedly discuss. It may just be the injury and how we've been playing that has kept him on the bench, but I hope that changes next year. He might be the only player that can score effectively at all three levels. 6'11", versatile defender who can score over anyone, shouldn't be on the bench. At FVNNYMN. Funny man. There we go. Sorry. I guess I should have tried to read it before spelling it out. Honestly, I co-sign. I fully agree. Look, I've been one of Jabari's loudest champions, supporters, what have you, but I also think that Jabari is kind of an unfortunate side effect of what you're seeing as far as the Rockets kind of expedited. I don't even want to call it expedited. That's not the right word for it, but just kind of a casualty of the direction the Rockets rebuild ultimately went. If Jabari were in a different situation, I feel like there's a lot more left than what we kind of only just scratched the surface with Jabari Smith Jr. One thing, though, that moving him to the bench has done is I think it's given him the confidence to be a little bit more aggressive offensively and really seeking out his shot. Sometimes when he was in the starting five with Jalen and Fred and Alp and DB, Jabari and DB are kind of the afterthoughts offensively, right? They're the play finishers. They're the guys who spot up for their threes when Alp or Jalen commands a double or Fred initiates some offense and then he gets, the kick out to one of them. When Jabari is playing on the bench, he's got a little bit more freedom to be aggressive at times and really kind of hunt his own shot, go up against mismatches, really like the jumbo lineups where we see Jabari at the three. I fully agree. I think there's more there. So I do think he's underutilized to an extent. But what does that look like if you try to scale up Jabari Smith Jr.? Is he a guy that can be scaled up to, 15, 20 shot attempts a game? I still think he's got a lot of possibility there. Maybe it doesn't ultimately happen within the confines of how the Rockets are presently constructed. But I don't think it's necessarily a mistake to bring him off the bench. In fact, I think it's helped unlock some of the best parts of him as a player. From Abrar Amartube, what is the likelihood that Ime Udoka will still be the Rockets head coach after 2027? I'd argue pretty damn good, given how successful these first couple of years have been. I think that the Rockets love Ime. Ime loves Houston, has shown zero reason why he wouldn't want to stay here and continue building things long term. I'd argue that Ime Udoka would likely still be the head coach in Boston if things hadn't gone sideways with that situation over there. Ime is one of the best head coaches in the league. He's brought the Rockets to a level of respectability amongst their peers and has made them one of the best teams in the NBA kind of overnight, right? First year, 41-41, a 19-win improvement. And then this year, at least so far, an 11-win improvement and the fourth best record in the NBA, locking up the 2 seed in a just absolutely brutal Western Conference and still so much more room to improve. I think there's a very strong likelihood that Ime Udoka is a long-term fixture as the head coach for the Houston Rockets. And I think he'll be the one to break the kind of 4-year curse that the Rockets head coaching position has kind of been under for a period of time now. Coming up, we're going to get into some questions about Alperen Sengun as potentially the best closing option for this Rockets team. What about expectations for the playoffs, this upcoming offseason, roster moves, all that good stuff? We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. Look, NBA fans, get ready. They swoosh, you save. Thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the very next day. It's simple. When any player scores 50 or more in a game during the 24-25 NBA regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order, up to $10 off the next day from noon until midnight. It's that simple. You see a guy drop a 50-piece or more, and you're getting $10 off your next DoorDash order with Dash Pass. So after you watch an epic 50-piece, 50-point performance, whatever, head over to the Dash Pass app the next day, order yourself some lunch at work, or maybe your team's got a back-to-back that night, or maybe you were watching some other team play and then your team's playing that night. You want to enjoy the game a little bit more, order yourself some wings, get some takeout, do whatever you want to do. Sign up at Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order the very next day, up to $10 off. Just use promo code NBA50 from noon until midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, let's get to our next question here about Alperen Sengun from Nice Shot 911. As someone who is only a Rockets fan because I am an Alperen Sengun fan, this might not end well. Don't you think that Sengun has shown he can be the closer in so many big-time games? Think of the T-Wolves game earlier this year or the crazy game against the 76ers where he literally came in as the closer in the last second of the game plus the overtime period. Even if he isn't what you consider a closer, to me, he is the alpha on this team. Do you agree, Jackson? I agree to an extent. Unfortunately, this is a guard-driven league. It is. It is a guard-driven league, and unfortunately, this Rockets team has not shown that they can consistently put Alperen Sengun in the spots for him to be successful at the end of close games. And that's problematic, right? Think about how the Rockets looked playing against the Lakers the other night and how easy it was for LA and for LeBron James to just scheme Sengun out of the Rockets offense completely, simply by fronting him, simply by sending, two defenders to the ball, by shading heavily over. Like, there were so many different things that they did to basically neutralize Alperen Sengun. It's always going to be easier when you're a guard or a wing player who can walk the ball up and who can initiate their own offense from the perimeter. Now, that's also something that Alperen Sengun can do. He can face up somebody from the top. He doesn't have to post up to be able to be the go-to guy down the stretch of a game. But I think there are certain limitations, unfortunately. And some of that is maybe by design. Some of that's maybe due to inexperience. Alperen Sengun has absolutely shown that he can be the closer for this Rockets team. But it still hasn't been consistent enough. And some of that is, again, due to his teammates. Some of that is due to his own limitations at times. I think right now, if you had to ask me, Jalen Green is best suited to be the Rockets closer because he's the one guy who can, outside of LP, reliably and consistently create his own shot from anywhere on the floor, getting downhill, finishing at the rim, getting to his mid-range, step back threes, all of it. LP can reliably generate a double team more effectively than Jalen can, which is better, I think, overall for the Rockets offense, as opposed to Jalen, who really has to initiate a drive and kick to collapse the defense. Or if he's on an absolute heater, then sometimes teams elect to send two to the ball to take the basketball out of his hands. It's really tough, and it's going to take both of those guys at this point. The Rockets don't have one de facto guy who is the certified go-to closer at the end of a game. It's going to take both Jalen and Alp and really them two working together as a dynamic two-man game for the Rockets to have a shot to close out some of the better teams come this postseason. From Danzel Sales 2555, do you think Amin deserves DPOY, and what's your opinion on why Cam Whitmore doesn't play more? So I'll start with the Amin Thompson really quickly. I think that Amin should absolutely be in the discussion for DPOY, and I think there's a very legitimate argument to make that he does deserve it. I don't think he's going to get it this season. Here's a stat that I'll throw your way that I think is absolutely absurd. Amin's defensive disruption rate, which is steals plus blocks plus forced turnovers, is at 5.2 per 36 minutes this season. That makes him second in defensive disruption rate in the entire NBA. Jaren Jackson Jr. is number one at 5.625. Amin Thompson is number two with 5.22. Dyson Daniels is in third place, 5.16. And Anthony Davis is in fourth place at 4.94. That, to me, just shows a little bit of his sheer impact, right? The things that he does on the floor. I'd love to see a stat that actually factors in things like deflections and things like that as well. I just don't think it's his year to win it. I don't think he has the narrative behind him. He didn't start for the first part of the season. It's kind of a late push to get him involved there. I think he's absolutely first team all defense. On the Cam Whitmore stuff, it just feels like he hasn't completely bought into everything that Ime Udoka is preaching for this team. The talent is absolutely there, and he's improved in a variety of ways. He's grown. He's not a black hole anymore on offense. You see his willingness to pass and set up his teammates when he does get minutes. But it's just got to be a really tough situation for Cam to be a contributor your rookie season, to feel like you have a role carved out for yourself on a contending team or a team that wants to take that step towards contention. and then to effectively lose that role, and to lose that role to a rookie, no less, to lose that role to Reed Sheppard, watch Reed get phased out, watch Aaron Holiday get phased back in, and likely feeling like you're better than both of those players, which I think from a sheer talent perspective at this moment, Cam is absolutely better than both of those guys on paper, but not quite the fit, right? Cam isn't the primary ball handler that this Rockets team has needed at times, or secondary ball handler. He's an elite play finisher, but he also hasn't locked in enough on the defensive side of the basketball for Ime Udoka to trust him consistently with rotation minutes. And the Rockets have this backlog of wings that are already ahead of him in the rotation. So it's a really tough situation, I think, for Cam Whitmore to ultimately be in. I still think the world of him, and I still think he's got incredibly sky-high potential. But if you're looking at the core seven and who the Rockets are probably lowest on right now, it's probably Cam Whitmore at this point, unfortunately. Let's get into some playoff-related questions here before we navigate to the offseason stuff, because there are a lot of questions that y'all have about the offseason. All right, first question here from Benjamin Barr. What is the Rockets' ceiling this playoffs? Realistic ceiling, I think, is Western Conference Finals, being completely honest. And that's I'm trying to take as much homerism out of that answer as possible. This Rockets team could very well be headed for a Western Conference Finals appearance against, more than likely, the Oklahoma City Thunder. That's the likely one of the two teams in the West to be at that top end of the bracket. But the Rockets have shown this season that they can literally match up with and beat any single one of the teams below them in the standings. And they're going to have to beat two of those teams if they want to meet up with OKC in the Western Conference Finals. And the way things are lining up as far as the brackets and how things are potentially going to look, I kind of like the Rockets' chances realistically against almost anybody that they're going to face in the first round. And I think I'm going to like their chances against whoever they're lined up with in the second round too, if they make it there. Now, they're a young team. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. Playoffs are the playoffs for a reason. Experience, there's no substitute for experience, and this Rockets team has very little playoff experience. So we'll see if that rears its ugly head. But realistic ceiling, I think, is Western Conference Finals for this team. I think the outcome is likely a second round defeat, probably a competitive second round defeat, something like 6 or 7 games against whoever they ultimately play. All right. If there was one player on the Rockets to have one of those crazy playoff runs that you see like Jimmy Butler or Jamal Murray in the bubble, going strictly off your gut feeling, who would it be on this team? That's from Ramir Smith. Jalen Green, easily. Jalen Green is the most equipped player on this Rockets roster to go on an absolute heater in the playoffs. Period, bar none, point blank. Maybe you could talk me into, Fred VanVleet going on a tear, or Amin Thompson just completely dominating the postseason. Maybe Alp, has a few games that he strings together, but I think there's only one player on the Rockets roster, and there's a key link here, right? Jimmy, ball handler. Jamal Murray, ball handler. You need to be the guy who has the ball in your hands a lot to be able to go on one of those historic kind of playoff runs. I think that if the Rockets lucked into getting, last year's March Jalen Green at the start of a postseason, if you could tell me that Jalen Green could go on an 11-game tear like what he did last March, or January Jalen Green, the tear that he was on in the month of January, you get that version of Jalen Green in the playoffs, Rockets could very well be going to the finals. That's how good that version of Jalen Green is if the Rockets can get him in the postseason. Over-under playoff wins from my guy, AK Infinity. Are you asking me for my predict? Okay, I'm going to do this. I want to answer it, but I also you didn't set the over-under for me. So this is where I'm going to put this as the comment. And so you're going to have to comment. You're watching the video. Give me your thoughts. If I set the over-under for Rockets playoff wins at 7.5, are you taking the over? Or are you taking the under? Over would mean you feel confident that the Rockets are winning at least 2 series, right? If you series I, whatever. If you take the over on that at 7.5, you take the over, that's 8 wins. That's a guaranteed trip to the Western Conference Finals. You take the under, that could mean 7 wins, right? You win the first round, you make it to a game 7 in the second round, but you don't advance. So what would you, dear listener, dear viewer, pick? If I set the over-under for Rockets playoff wins at 7.5, you going over, you going under? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. All right, for my guy Tiziano here, what are your favorite matchups for the first round? I'm sorry, Tiz, I'm not going to fully unpack that here. We've done that a couple times in recent episodes, but I will say, like I said momentarily ago, I'm not scared of any of the first round matchups for the Rockets. Honestly, I think the Grizzlies are probably my favorite, if we're being completely honest, just because it doesn't seem like things are great in Memphis right now. If you could pick a dream run to the finals, who do you think they should play against to have the best chance at reaching the finals? Best chance at reaching the finals, I'd say give me Grizzlies round 1. Literally anybody. Like, I really don't want any part in having to deal with Jokic or dealing with the Lakers and the whistles that they're going to get in the second round. So ideally no part in dealing with the 3-time MVP or the Lakers. So at that point in the second round, give me any of the Wolves or the Clippers or the Warriors. Give me somebody who gets an upset from the lower side of the bracket to meet the Rockets in that side. And if we're being completely honest, yeah, give me an upset over the OKC Thunder. Give me like a Dallas Mavericks, Cinderella run to the Western Conference Finals to try and wash Nico Harrison of his sins. I don't know. No, that's not realistic, right? If I wanted to go, I'll take this question a different route. I think the most compelling narrative-based route to the finals for the Rockets would be beating the Warriors in round 1, lining up against the James Harden and Kawhi Leonard-led Clippers in round 2, a Clippers team that upsets one of the Lakers or the Nuggets to get to round 2 on the 2-3 side of the bracket. So then you beat the Warriors, ushering in the new era of Rockets playoff basketball. Then you beat James Harden, the guy who was the previous era of Rockets basketball. And then you match up with the Thunder in the Western Conference Finals, who are, the juggernaut of this NBA season. And if you were able to go that route, Warriors, Clippers, Thunder, and make it to the finals, damn, I don't even care what happens in the finals. That's an incredible run. But yeah, I think that outcome would be a ton of fun. At least that's my own personal preference. Coming up, we're going to get into off-season expectations, roster moves, things of that nature. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Look, there's nothing like the energy of a live game. Whether it's catching a last-minute MLB showdown or soaking in the excitement of an NBA playoff matchup, but finding great seats at a great price, that used to be a challenge until I found Game Time. Game Time makes scoring last-minute tickets easier than ever. Prices actually drop as the event gets closer. And with their all-in pricing, you see the total cost up front. No surprise fees, no hidden fees at checkout. Here's why I love using Game Time. Last minute deals, you save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concert, comedy, theater events. It's awesome. Just swoop in, grab a last minute deal. You can grab last minute seats for the Rockets and save big with their zone deals. You get peace of mind. You get views from your seat before you buy, no surprise fees, and a lowest price guarantee. Their lowest price guarantee means you never worry about overpaying. Take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. I really should do more of these mailbag episodes. I love it. I love interacting with other Rockets fans and kind of talking about the team. It's one of the things that I miss about doing those playback rooms back in the day with Dave and Roosh. Maybe I'll do one of these. You know what? Maybe I'll do one of these live someday. I've wanted to do a live mailbag before. Sometimes the logistics can be a little annoying to deal with, but you know what? I'll put an additional comment thing or whatever. And, if enough people say that they would want a live mailbag where you can ask questions live, tune in, discuss, whatever, then I'll find some time and we'll make it happen because, doing live mailbags might be a little bit more fun than these pre-recorded questions, if that makes sense. But all right, let's finish off the mailbag here. A lot of off-season questions here for this final segment. So after this postseason, assuming we get knocked out second round or whatever your expectations may be, where in this rotation do you look first to improve and maximize the minutes played? From DeBoss20. I think you have to look at it through the lens of Amen Thompson's not going anywhere. Rockets, he's probably number one on, not even probably, he is decidedly number one on the Rockets ranking of the core seven, I would say. Jalen and Sengun are very much locked in unless there is some kind of true blue top 15, top 10 guy that becomes available. I'm fairly confident in the Rockets' desire to continue rocking with Jalen and Sengun. So those three guys are locked in, and those three guys are absolutely starting going forward, right? Which leaves two open spots in your starting lineup in the idea of, Fred VanVleet, Dillon Brooks, that you would look to upgrade or move on from either of those two guys. So I think that's mainly where you start to look to make improvements. Again, whether it's upgrading that point guard spot, maybe it's upgrading elsewhere on the wings, maybe it's upgrading Dillon's spot. And they can go in a variety of ways, right? Earlier, I mentioned the idea of maybe the starting backcourt next season is simply Jalen Green and Amin Thompson in the starting backcourt. And maybe that's because the Rockets make a swing deal for a starting caliber forward. Maybe you want to upgrade the Dillon Brooks position, but that's where I would look at first, depending on what happens, how this season ultimately comes to an end in the playoffs. Those are the two spots that make the most sense to ultimately try and upgrade. The Rockets have a ton of depth. I don't think they need to worry about a backup point guard. Reed's your backup point guard. You've got a ton of wing depth with Tari and Jabari still coming off the bench. Jayshawn Tate is still there in the wings as well. The Rockets going to have to worry about trying to figure out a new contract for him, which is definitely going to be something that they've got to figure out this offseason. So there's a handful of things that you could do, but I think you're looking at upgrading point guard or small forward first and foremost. Next question. With the firing of a lot of coaches recently, would any be good additions to the Rockets coaching staff? Michael Malone, Taylor Jenkins. I don't think either of those guys are necessarily in the realm of, being so down bad as to needing to take a lead assistant position anywhere. I will maintain that I do think, and I think there's actually, I think there was maybe another question about this, or did I not? No, never mind. Okay. I guess this is the only coaching question. I try to group the questions together in case there's similarities, but, I still think that Ime Udoka might be in need of some offensive tweaking. And I would not be opposed to Ime Udoka bringing in a new member of his coaching staff to be kind of the lead offensive coordinator, right? To help him out on that side of the basketball, to add a little bit of something new to some of the offensive schemes that we've seen. I don't know if that's a limitation on Udoka's part. I don't know if he's keeping things simple, vanilla to prevent turnovers or what have you, but there's a lot of there's a lack of what feels like creativity on that side of the basketball at times from this coaching staff. I will say that the Rockets assistant coaching core with Ben Sullivan and Royal Ivey at the top of that coaching staff, either one of those guys are prime candidates to potentially get plucked and become their own head coach of their own team at some point next season. And if that were the case, then, you could see Ime Udoka look to fill that vacancy essentially. But both of those guys are looked at as prime candidates to eventually take on their own head coaching role someday. Maybe not as early as next season, but it could happen. And that's a reality that the Rockets and Ime Udoka are going to have to face somewhere down the line. But I don't think you add Taylor Jenkins or Michael Malone to this Rockets coaching staff. All right, two similar questions here. If Fred VanVleet happens to be the weak link during this postseason run, what direction do you think the Rockets would go to fill the point guard position? That's from @HardyGraham, and then from @HoustonRocketDream. Do we cut our losses with FVV in the offseason and go for Drew Holiday, who is available? He's an upgrade in every way, plus he's a lot cheaper and under contract. Something to wait, is he hang on. What Celtics payroll? Is he available or is he under contract? What is he? Okay, well, is he available? I haven't seen a single report or anything that said that Drew Holiday was available from the Celtics. I don't know what makes you think Drew Holiday is available. I don't necessarily think he's available. In a hypothetical world where he was, then sure. But I don't think the Rockets have what the Celtics would want. I don't think the Celtics are in a position where they would want to unload Drew Holiday. Anyways, let's 86 that one. But the Fred VanVleet thing, right? What direction do you think the Rockets would go to fill the point guard position? $1 million question. I think they could be, honestly, I think that you would take some lumps if you did it, but I think under the right circumstances, you could absolutely just run with Jalen, Amin, and Reed next year, and you'd be fine. And you still have Aaron Holiday maybe on the roster as your, insurance backup guard kind of policy behind those three guys. But I think that Reed has shown you enough this season. Jalen and Amin have both continued to grow this season as primary ball handlers. Yes, you would take some lumps. Yes, you would, it'd be bumpy at times without Fred, who's, more than just the point guard of this team. He's very much the emotional leader of this team. He is the guy that all the players look to up and down the roster as the de facto leader of this squad. And until one of Jalen or Sengun or possibly Amin Thompson is ready to embody that vocal leadership role on a night-to-night, game-to-game basis, then that's probably the biggest loss that you feel with Fred VanVleet. Less so about the counting stats and the actual on-court production, but the off the court stuff that truly matters. And that's where the Rockets need one of the young guys to really take a step up and embrace being, embrace being the best player on the team, embrace being the locker room leader. And we don't know who that player is going to be yet. We know that guys have become more vocal, but we don't know who's going to ultimately be able to fill in those shoes on a long-term basis yet. How do we extend both Smith and Eason in the summer? Do we have the room to do that, keeping in mind that Amin could very well be a max or almost max guy in 2027? First and foremost, Amin Thompson is absolutely going to be a max guy. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. He's getting the straight rookie max when it comes time. I would bet my entire livelihood on that outcome. Secondly, Rockets are in a position where Jabari and Tari are not going to command anywhere near the money that Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun did this past offseason. They're just very different players, right? Jabari and Tari are both high-end role players. Jalen and Sengun are your offensive engines, right? They're the guys that the offense runs through. They're your tier one guys, your alphas, your scorers, whatever. The Rockets are very much in a position where you just extend Jabari, you extend Tari, you try to get them on relatively team-friendly contracts. And if push comes to shove later and you do need to open up money, if you need to move some things around, you could deal either of or both of those guys if push came to shove. I want to highlight here, though, that the Rockets will have every opportunity to extend these guys and to beat out any other team. It's not like any team can come in and swoop up and grab Jabari or take Tari away or offer more money or any of that stuff. The Rockets are going to be able to keep both Jabari and Tari this offseason, no problem, unless they offer like an insultingly low contract or completely lowball them and they want to take their chances and go to restricted free agency. And even then, the Rockets have the ability to outright match what any other team would come by and offer. And unless one of them has like a super explosive year where they're like, oh my God, this guy's like a tier one guy and he was hidden this whole time as a role player, which I think is highly unlikely to happen for either of them. Nobody's going to roll around and come by and offer, Jabari or Tari, 30 or 35 or 40 million a year to come play for them. It's just not realistic. So yeah, keeping Jabari and Tari, not an issue, and it's not going to impact their ability to keep them in long term. Now, the biggest thing is going to be the pain tolerance of paying the luxury tax. That'll be where things do get it a little iffy, right? Are the Rockets willing to pay Amin Thompson a max and Sengun a near max and Jalen a near max? And then you're going to have to figure out Jalen's contract down the line too, because he's only signed to 3 years as opposed to the 5 years that they got for Alperen Sengun. So if Jalen continues to ball out and if he starts to look like an all-star, if he is an all-star next season, then you're going to be on the hook for likely a max deal to Jalen Green somewhere around that same time that the Amin Thompson contract would become a thing. So that becomes a much harder equation to solve down the line. But Jabari and Tari, not a big deal. Is there a possibility we get not only KD, but also Harden too with him being a free agent? I won't talk about KD because I don't want people to continue to get mad at me about talking about KD, even though it's a very realistic possibility. Harden is an interesting potential outcome. If the Clippers flame out in the playoffs, with Harden being a free agent and with the Rockets having Fred VanVleet's contract and the ability to opt in and trade, there's something that could potentially go down there. There's no bad blood on either side. And in fact, one of the reasons, Ime Udoka has talked about not wanting Harden back when the Rockets could have gotten Harden was that they weren't ready to win. They weren't ready to play high-level basketball yet. They were still in the growing stages of the rebuild. And I think if you could just do a clean swap of Fred VanVleet for James Harden, either with Fred VanVleet opt-in and then James Harden sign and trade, I don't know the exact cap logistics of being able to pull something like that off, but it is a realistic possibility. And there's probably enough interest in reuniting on both sides, assuming things end catastrophically for the Clippers, that maybe both teams would entertain it. But at that point, I think this team only needs one of Harden or KD. They don't need both Harden and KD because then you're taking away from, you're just doing a rehash of, Harden, KD part whatever 17, and they're going to flame out and they're both going to be older veterans. I think if you wanted to bring in one of those guys to be more of a stabilizing force for this young group, a direct upgrade to Fred VanVleet as far as, an alpha, a closer at the end of games, whatever, or a table setter in Harden's case, sure, but you don't need both of them. Or you shouldn't want both of them. I think that'd just be too messy. I've been daydreaming about the Rockets somehow. Sorry, that was from Mr. Bowie 23. From Sergio, an everydayer. What's up, Sergio? Appreciate you being an everydayer. Is there a possibility, or sorry, I apologize. I've been daydreaming about the Rockets somehow acquiring Amin Thompson's twin, Asar Thompson. I know it's far-fetched, but I love to see it happen. What do you think? Could you see the twins playing together in Houston? Absolutely. Probably not anytime soon, but I very much see a world where even though they're identical twins, Amin Thompson's probably going to be the one who's the star or the better twin. Generally speaking, of all the twins that we've seen play in the NBA, there's always one that's substantially better than the other one. And I think Amin Thompson is the one who has the superstar upside potential. Asar is still going to be a very high-level player in the league and definitely on the same level defensively, but he's just going to be a very different player offensively. And in that being the case, assuming the Rockets hold on to Amin Thompson at all costs, at some point, those guys are going to want to play together. So as long as the Rockets keep Amin in Houston, eventually Asar may get that wandering eye and want to come reunite with his brother in H-Town, which would be sick. It'd be awesome. I'd love to see those two guys play together in the NBA. From Rockets Jack 10, do the Rockets ever plan to prioritize a young player or two in terms of system/roster construction? That's a great question. I think that this playoffs will tell us a lot about the direction this team is ultimately going to go. I think we're barreling towards some type of a consolidation trade this offseason. Look, we've already seen Cam Whitmore kind of fall by the wayside this season. We saw Reed Sheppard get barely any run as a rookie. We've seen Jabari take on a reduced role now coming off the bench. There's still the Phoenix Suns pick to consider, right? What do they do with that? Do they draft another young talent to come in? I think that this offseason will be the offseason where we see them start to make some strategic moves to really, put the right pieces around one or two of their star players, their young blossoming stars, and kind of building an identity, maybe more so catered towards the guy that they think is best equipped to lead them to a title down the line. From Squirrely Bear, if there was any player on the trade market that you could pick to have the Rockets trade for outside of Giannis and Luka, who would you want on this team, assuming Amin is not in this trade? Anthony Edwards, hands down. The Wolves have had a disappointing season relative to expectations. They've come on a bit as of late, but the Wolves you could easily see being in a position where, a year or two from now, if the Wolves struggle, if they can't achieve any postseason success, if they can't make it back to the Western Conference Finals, you could very much see a reality where Anthony Edwards asks out. The Rockets are in a position with a ton of young talent, a ton of future draft capital. I'd love to see them make a play for Anthony Edwards. A backcourt of Ant and Amin Thompson would literally dominate the league for 10 plus years. No, that without a doubt, Ant would. Now, I don't think that's realistic, at least not anytime soon. And I wouldn't exactly sit here and plan for Ant to ask out, but that's at least where my heart tells me Anthony Edwards of any player potentially available in the NBA. Let's go to at Carl Fair. Does Uncle Jeff retire or sign one more year? Interesting one here. This was actually the one I was looking for earlier with the coaching thing. I could very much see a reality where Uncle Jeff stays on as an assistant coach with the Rockets. Very much like Tiago Splitter, kind of phasing out of his player career, phasing into a coaching career. I could very much see that as a reality for Uncle Jeff. I could also see the Rockets just offering him some kind of a 1-year contract, and basically make him a human living, breathing trade exception, right? Give him a ballooned up contract that's worth a chunk of money that the Rockets could include in a trade or to use to grease the wheels somewhere. And then, he gets a payday. He's happy. He's basically essentially a coach on the bench as is. He's been playing a lot of garbage time this year, not really playing a consistent role like he was last year. So yeah, I could see that, maybe him joining the coaching staff or being an unofficial coach on the bench, maybe more so kind of that Udonis Haslem role a little bit near the tail end of his career. Let's see. 2 more questions here to wrap up. From Gels Troy T. I think that's Jackson. I think that's my name twin, Jackson. What's your favorite part about covering the Rockets? It's the team that I grew up watching, fell in love with basketball because of the Rockets, and I'm still very much a fan of the team. So getting to cover the team that I'm very much a fan of is awesome because not a lot of people get to say that they do that, right? And it can be tough at times, in a professional capacity, covering the team that you love. Right? I don't get to go to games as a media member and sit there in the fans or in the stands and cheer and clap and all that stuff. So it's a different level of like decorum and whatever that you have to maintain. But that's easily the best part about covering the Rockets is being a fan of the team, getting to cover them is awesome. Also, the players and personalities, like just you see so much that doesn't get caught on camera being at practices, being at shoot around, being at the games. You get the glimpse of, you get a picture of it from media availabilities and stuff like that, but seeing the way that the players interact, seeing how the coaches and other media members interact around this team, it's really cool as far as a behind the scenes look at things. Last question here, another kind of miscellaneous one from Tari's Toe. Love that tag or handle, I should say. What's the best moment you've been a part of for the Rockets? As in a media capacity, probably the drafting of Amin Thompson or them winning the in-season tournament game against the Golden State Warriors at Toyota Center. Like that, those are two of probably the biggest moments of me being a media member with this team, because again, that they've done a lot of losing, unfortunately, in the years that I kind of finally came onto the scene and started covering the team in a professional capacity. As a fan, though, I've told this story countless times on this show. I've told it in person before, but I was actually at the Rockets' 22nd win against the Los Angeles Lakers during the 22-game win streak. I was way up in the nosebleeds, but it was an awesome game. It was great being a part of history for that Rockets team. That was the game where Rafer Alston went off. Everybody was expecting it to be a Kobe Bryant, Trace McGrady showdown, and then Rafer Alston hit 8 3-pointers and then went skip to my Lou at the end of the game on Sasha Vujacic. One of my all-time favorite, possibly my absolute all-time favorite Rockets memory that I've personally been a part of. But that's as a fan, not as a media member. So I hope that answers your question. Appreciate everybody who dropped in a question or a topic. I apologize if I didn't get to your question or topic. Again, phased out some of the draft ones, phased out a couple other ones, but we'll do more of these later on, and hopefully maybe we'll do a live one soon. Again, if enough people are interested, then we'll do a live mailbag at some point down the line. But appreciate you for tuning into the show. Remember, the best way to help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Also check out our Locked On Rockets newsletter. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.